Happy Pumpkin Day, or National Pumpkin Day. I decided to celebrate, I would show the latest acquisition, a pumpkin. Don't tell it, but it's going to become pumpkin powder. I don't know how many of you follow along some of the vlogs that I do, but Tina at Wilhelm's Kitchen, Lisa at Sutton's Days, Mandy at More to Life, and Heather at The Needy Homesteader have done videos lately about things that they've canned, that they'll definitely can again, and those that they won't. And I decided I wanted to play too. So here's just a few of the things I've canned. I'm too lazy to bring it all out of the pantry. And I thought I'd run through some of them that I will can and some that, you know, they were okay, but I'm probably not going to do it again. Let's start with corn. Corn is pretty in a jar, and I like corn. I'm trying to get a decent picture here. The only problem is I can't eat a lot of corn at one time. It's too starchy. And so I only do it in half-pint jars. But even that is a little too much for, like a pot of soup or something like that. It's also one of the many things that I dehydrate as well. So I have options. I like options. It tastes good and it's easy to do, but I'm just not sure I'm going to do it again. I'm glad I have it. I only have a couple of the half-pint jars. I have mostly pints, and that's the problem, is figuring out how to use them without having to put them in the refrigerator. All right, so that's a maybe for next year, but they taste good. This is sweet pickle relish, and the recipe is in the Ball Blue Book. It's something that I have made for a long time, and I just love this stuff. Seriously, I could just open the jar and eat it out of the jar and not put it on anything. There's red peppers in here, or the red bell peppers in here, and cucumbers, and it's just one of the best tasting things in the world. It's a little sweet for me, but you know, every once in a while, you got to do what you got to do. And it's wonderful. There's a recipe for zucchini sweet relish that I may try sometime. But this is something that I've done for a long time. I think this year I did 8 half pints, so it should keep me for a while. Definitely on the to-do list. Okay, now, close your eyes. This is something you're not supposed to do, but hey, I blogged about it, so I might as well show you. Pumpkin butter. I did a lot of butters. I did pumpkin butter. I did assorted variations of apple butter. And this is my triple butter, which is cherry and plum. And apple. No, just cherry and plum butters. These are both good. I mean, you can't go wrong with apple butter. I mean, apple butter, any time of year, on anything, straight out of the jar, is a good thing. Triple butter was an experiment this year. Definitely doing it again. I also did a jam form, though I guess technically it's more of a preserve, but it's really good. It's not super sweet, and that's one of the things that surprises me about how much I love that sweet relish is I don't like things that are super sweet. This is not super sweet, and it is really good. Somebody asked me, and I don't remember whether it was a result of one of my blog posts or just one of my Facebook posts or something, you know, what do you do with all of this stuff? Because frankly, I made a heck of a lot of jam this year, and applesauce. And I eat it on toast and bread, of course. I also, you know, will take a dollop out of the jar occasionally. I like it mixed in with yogurt. Just plain old vanilla yogurt, and just put in a tablespoon or so. Okay, but back to the pumpkin butter. Now, you're not supposed to can this. I obviously did. And I put the instructions on my blog. So if you go to The Enabling Cook, and you'll find a link down below, and you'll find the recipe there. This is like eating apple pie in a jar. Now, I used maple syrup as as the sweetener. First of all, I don't use as much sugar as it says to. In any of my jams, preserves or butters for that matter. That's one of the advantages of butter is that generally speaking you don't need as much sugar, which also means the shelf life is probably not going to be as long. Trust me, that's not going to be a problem with this. This is a little too sweet for me. This was my first time making it, so I expect, tweaking to occur for subsequent batches. But it is, seriously, it is like eating an apple pie in a jar, and I'm alive. But like I said, the people who know these things say you're not supposed to can pumpkin like this. If you want to can pumpkin and squash, you do it in cubes. Obviously, I don't listen. Finally, I got tomatoes. Now, I grow tomatoes, but they don't want to grow as fast or as many at a time that would help me to can tomatoes. And yes, I could put them in the freezer, but part of the idea behind this canning is that I take things out of the freezer. But I finally found a farm stand that had canning tomatoes. So I bought 2 bushels. And these are whole tomatoes that I cold packed. And I made an Italian style tomato sauce. And I did crushed tomatoes. And then I took several and dehydrated them and made tomato powder because you cannot have too much tomato powder. So I have probably 8 or 9 pints and 6 or 7 quarts of whole tomatoes. And then I think I did 6 pints of the tomato, or maybe half pints of the tomato sauce, because I don't eat pasta. So I like to use it as a base for another sauce or even as a tomato soup. And I can also dehydrate, well, actually any of the tomatoes, I can dehydrate and make more tomato powder. One of the things that kind of surprised me, let's see, where are they? Here's one. When I started following a lot of these, I must have, oh no, here it is. Canning, or vlogs that dealt with canning, was how many people can beans. And now I dehydrate beans sometimes, and people think that's odd. But I thought, well, shoot, I'll give it a try because I love beans, and I often forget to, start them early enough when I want to cook them with something or add them to soup. So I did. Now these don't look pretty, but sometimes pretty doesn't really hold much. These are Great Northern beans. These are really, really good. I use the no-soak method that I learned from Heather on the Needy Homesteader, and they're probably the easiest thing you can. I don't think this is an approved method, but a lot of people do it, and it's very effective. You don't soak your beans. For a pint, you put a half a cup of beans and then fill it up with hot water. Some people put salt or other seasonings in it. I don't, because I'm never really sure what I'm going to use them for. So these are just plain old Great Northern beans. Take no time at all to heat up, and it's getting colder out, so I'm thinking I should probably put more beans away. I also did some black beans that I will use for chili. And speaking of chili, oh my, chili beans. These are just red kidney beans. Again, I did this the no-soak method. Only this time I added some of my chili mix, which is, it's, what is it? There's chili powder in there, there's cumin powder in there, and onion powder, and assorted other seasonings that I use whenever I make chili. And I added it to the beans before I put the beans in, put in the seasoning, and then the water, and then canned it. When I opened the first jar of these after I did them, oh my heavens, I could have just heated them up and been quite happy, and would have tasted like chili because of the chili mix. Be careful when you're putting the seasonings in, because they do tend to intensify. It was fine with me because though my chili mix has a certain heat factor to it, I usually add more peppers when I'm actually making the chili, because then that way I know how hot I want it to be, and sometimes I want it hotter than other times. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I need to make more of those too. When I was a kid, I also canned several. Now this is the, what is it? 3/4 of a pint jar. What would it be? 18, 20? Well, anyway, you know what? It's smaller than a pint of green beans. I have several of these. One of my favorite foods in the world. And when I was a kid, we always had a huge garden, and Mom made green beans with potatoes. Now she usually added bacon or something, but I don't do bacon, or any pork, so I left that out. And there's also no salt in this because I prefer to can without salt. So I decided to do these together. Then that way I don't have to worry about, do I have potatoes when I want potatoes and green beans? Because they're all in one thing. I can also just open one of these and throw them in a soup or a stew. And they're already cooked, so, hey, you're good to go. I also canned jars of just potatoes. These are just white potatoes. I also canned some sweet potatoes. Those and both white potatoes or red potatoes, sweet potatoes, and green beans are also things that I dehydrate. So I have them in my dehydrating pantry as well as in my canning pantry. One of the reasons I wanted to can this year was to can leftovers because I'm trying to get things out of my deep freeze. We have had power failures often enough that it concerns me. So I decided to can my leftovers when I could. This is a cabbage sausage soup that I don't seem to be able to make small quantities of, which is a good thing. And they're not always the same thing in each version. This has cabbage in it, obviously, and there's probably turkey kielbasa from the looks of it, carrots, and kale, because I like putting kale in soup. It's healthy for you. So I had what I wanted for dinner that night, and then I've canned the leftovers, and I've been eating those in subsequent months. Now, one thing I did notice that sometimes the cabbage gets a little mushy, but that's okay. The taste is still there, and that's, to me anyway, what's most important. I also like to make big pots of turkey chili, and I'll eat turkey chili for dinner. I usually leave a little bit in the refrigerator to have for over the next couple of days, and then I can the leftovers. And I think I've only got one container of turkey chili left, so that's something else that's going to have to be made. One of my favorite soups, and I make it quite often, is an eggplant soup. I call it eggplant ratatouille, but it probably really isn't. It's usually based on whatever vegetables I have on hand, besides eggplant. Sometimes I'll throw in zucchini if I have zucchini, green beans if I have green beans, tomatoes, carrots. It's just a really hearty stew that is quite tasty. And again, this is something that I make in large quantities and then can. I also found a recipe for mushroom soup concentrate. I love mushroom soup. I hate buying those cans. So I did several of these. These are good to make mushroom soup out of. You just, you thicken it a little. Don't thicken before putting in the jar. Thicken when you use it. And then add milk, cream if you want. Or just leave it as it is. You can also cook it down and make a mushroom sauce. It's a good base for a soup or a stew, another soup or a stew like a beef stew or something like this, which I also use my canned French onion soup in. I used it the other day as base for a beef stew, and it's really, really good. Especially now I put Worcestershire sauce in mine, and it's really good with that. But this is a good basic mushroom soup, and you know what's in it, which is one of the reasons I don't like buying the commercially available soups. Something I thought I would never can was meat. Now these are not pretty, and if you've got a squeamish stomach, you might want to turn away from the camera. But these are surprisingly tasty. I mean, if you base it on looks. one of the stores had chicken breasts on sale. And I had chicken breasts in the freezer. And like I said, I'm trying to empty the freezer out. So I canned it. Now these are the raw packed. There's a terrible light in here. It's just, you put the chicken in the container, and that's it. And then as it processes, it creates its own juice. Now obviously, this created a lot of juice. Now I sometimes will add a little broth, a little seasoned broth in there. Now these look ugly. They taste good. They're great in soup. They're great in stir fries even. You can also add it or make a chicken salad from it. I think though the next time, one of the things that happens when you raw pack is, if you can see, sometimes they stick to the jar. Now mine have not stuck to the jar. They have, however, stuck together, which is not a big deal. And they do tend to shred when you cook them. But again, I don't care. Some people might. And I mean, it depends on what you want to use it for. And if you're really into texture and aesthetics. I think the next time I'm going to try, and I have done some where I par cook them. I haven't opened those yet, but I noticed that they have stayed separate. So I think I will do that and can it in a little bit of broth containing a bouillon that has maltodextrose in it. That's supposed to keep them, help them hold their shape. So I'm going to try that as well. But the taste is there, and that is the most important thing. Now this is something else that's really gross. I eat a lot of ground turkey. Now that's not the gross part. And when stores have it on sale, I try to pick up multiple packages. But then, you know, you've got the same storage problem. What are you going to do with it? Well, you're going to can it, of course. Now, this was raw pack, so now these did stick to the jar a little. Whoops. Well, not as bad as I thought, but they definitely stuck together. It never really occurred to me to par cook this first, or the ground turkey first. And I had watched a video, and they had par cooked some ground pork, but she said she did that to get rid of the fat. Now, this was fairly lean, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I think next time I will par cook this. But I'm glad to have this on my shelf because I know it's there. If money's I'm a full-time freelancer. You know, I don't get paid unless I have work, and you know, work is, thank God, fairly steady. But for those slow times, it's nice to have food on the shelf. Now, this is another one of those things that you know, you might go, ew, but you know, give it a chance. Hummus in a jar.